Hello. We are here to have a conversation, basically amongst different solutions that we have with navigating our fall, and to also have a conversation about how to reach learners in equitable ways with either low to no tech options. My name is Dr. Jace Saplan. I am the Director of Choral Activities at the University of Hawaii. I have with me Dr. Scott Glysson, who is the Director of Choral Activities at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Dr. Arian Khaefi, the Director of Choral Activities at South Dakota State University. I have Dr. Cari Earnhart with me, the Director of Choral Activities at Fresno State. And I also we have a guest with us, Dr. Matthew Bumbach, the Director of Choral Activities at the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. Hello, friends. So I'm wondering, just to kind of establish some alignment, if we could just kind of round robin and catch us up as to where our plans are, where are we with navigating the fall, and what's going on with your own respective programs. Dr. Khaefi, can you get us started?
Certainly. So at San Diego State University, we have been given the green light to have choral ensembles, orchestral ensembles, and bands meet face-to-face. And while we have the learning modality confirmed, what we don't know now are the logistics surrounding that. So how many people in the room, if it's a room at all, what that venue is going to look like for rehearsal, what numbers in the student cohorts. I'm sure that those numbers will be limited, what the duration of rehearsals will be like. So all those logistics surrounding our rehearsals now are in discussion. The research hasn't caught up to be able to allow us to really affirmatively or definitively say one way or another what is going to be safe and what isn't going to be safe. And so as the research emerges and evolves, we're trying to stay up to date with that in terms of our decision-making processes. So that's where we are at SDSU currently.
Thank you. Dr. Glisten, how are things going at San Luis Obispo?
So yeah, so we're kind of a little further back in the process as Arian is. So we have been approved by our administration, the president's office. So we've set forward the proposal to have face-to-face ensembles and lessons. So we're just waiting on approval from the CSU Chancellor's office. But in the meantime, we're figuring out sort of how that would look. And just to kind of quickly say what that is, we're in the choral area, we're really looking at being outside. We're really particularly hoping to get a portion of one of our parking garages because then it gives us a little bit of acoustic feedback, but still that open air. So that's kind of what we're hoping for. We're working with those departments, hoping that we do get approval from the Chancellor's office. We also have a performing arts center in San Luis Obispo that's being really generous in allowing us to use some of their actual space that is really large. Not sure if the choral area, I'm much more comfortable outside at this point, but we'll see if things change. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of those things.
Great, thank you. Dr. Earnhart, how are things going in Fresno?
Well, we're on a similar page as Scott is, Dr. Glisten. We're kind of past the proposal stage on our campus, but we are waiting for the Chancellor's approval, hopefully, for some face-to-face ensembles, as well as face-to-face grad lessons and some lessons face-to-face if they're a graduating senior doing a recital. That's also an option that was put into our proposal. We are also looking to try to rehearse outside when weather permits. It gets awfully hot here in Fresno. So to have a 1 p.m. rehearsal and it's 105 degrees outside doesn't seem feasible. But we've also put into our proposal to use our band hall. Of course, it would be limited numbers of students at a time, around 20 probably. we hope. And, you know, wearing a mask if they're inside for the choral singers and the string players. Of course, that's won't work for our wind players. And then we're still looking at the with or without a mask in the outside setting. We've told them that we would space a minimum of 8 to 10 feet apart. We're looking more at maybe 10 to 12 for spacing of students within each ensemble. So we're in the wait and see game also. We're hopeful, but we just don't know at this point.
Dr. Bumbach?
Yeah, so my situation is quite a bit different because I'm teaching at a STEM university, so I'm not teaching any music majors. So we have a lot of different considerations. For example, none of our students have an ensemble requirement. Therefore, we're simply there as kind of a support, trying to get our music minors the credits that they need and trying to kind of augment that STEM curriculum. So for us, we have a large converted gymnasium that's been restored. That's our rehearsal space, very large space. So I do feel comfortable putting a very small group in that space, aside from the fact that we have no HVAC system. South Dakota is pretty cold during most of the academic year. So we have heat, but no air conditioning in the building. So I'm a little worried about ventilation. So currently we're having some risk assessment done about our rehearsal space to see if it's even worth having an octet in the space. I'm converting a number of my ensembles to hybrid or online instruction. So my tenor bass choir and my soprano alto choir is going to take a semester and focus on vocal technique, more like a vocal tech class. We're going to do some study of anatomy and physiology. We're going to do some technique study. We're going to do some Zoom and Skype lessons, one-on-one with students periodically, and we're going to let them focus on some online music creation in small groups, in duets and trios. But I have the luxury of doing that, of very much redefining that. I have a large ensemble of students and community members that is going to probably do 1 or 2 virtual choir experiences throughout the semester. But again, it's going to be, we have access to the technology and we have the luxury of not having to meet any particular requirements because we're not NESM accredited, we don't have that graduation requirement. And then I have a chamber group that's going to be reduced to, my plan is reduce them to about 8 singers and an accompanist and majorly spread within that gymnasium. We've discussed the idea of going outdoors, but that outdoor rehearsal would only really be possible for about 4 weeks of our semester before we start getting snowed in. So I have a lot of luxury with the possibility of reimagining things. But I also have a lot of limitations because we have absolutely no guidance from our Board of Regents because we have so few universities in our system. So they're really not prioritizing the arts. They're really prioritizing getting everyone back to normal, as our governor has said here, despite the fact that we're on a major spike right now of COVID cases. So I am planning everything throughout the semester with the possibility of pulling back and making it entirely virtual.
Thank you for that. And I think, thank you for kind of inviting us into kind of your curricular plans too. I was ferociously taking notes here, and it seems like I think a great entry point that we can talk about in terms of equity and access is space. So I know for some of us, we're kind of in the heart of a city. Dr. Khaefi, especially you at San Diego State University. But something that we're struggling with here at the University of Hawaii is we are right in the heart of the city, and there's just not a lot of space on an island to begin with. So even though we have, you know, an ideal climate for outside singing, the getting there or having space on campus reserved for a socially distant ensemble, anywhere from 10 to 12 feet, I mean, that's prime real estate that we don't necessarily have. So I'm wondering, Dr. Glysson, in your innovative thinking of looking at a parking structure, a parking lot, what did that look like, and what were the steps to get there, and what's next after that?
Well, we're not quite there yet. We're moving there. So, you know, we sometimes, first of all, the thought came to our head because it literally, our main parking garage on campus is literally right next to the music building. So that's very convenient. It's a large parking garage. Cal Poly is primarily an on-campus community. Most of the students live on campus or near campus. And then when you're talking about 85 to 90% of the student body not even being on campus, there's a lot of open space in the parking garage. So it's what we kind of thought of. We sing in there sometimes anyway, just for fun, because it's really acoustically live. So where we're at right now is we submitted it. My department chair, I should specify, submitted it as a part of our proposal. The administration found it interesting. And so the further conversations have been with the Parking and Transportation Services Department on campus. They are supportive, but ultimately it's going to kind of come down to what they're comfortable with. So that's kind of what we're thinking. In terms of open space, what you were talking about, Jace, it's an issue for us too, probably not so as much because we're not a major city. San Luis Obispo, it's a college town. But, you know, it kind of comes down to a lot of things. Like the marching band wants to use the outside space. The regular band wants to use the outside space. There's a lot of groups, even though there are a lot of groups that aren't going to be on campus. The ones that are all kind of vying for the same green space. And then when you couple that with the need, if you have an accompanist, if you need an accompanist, then you need power, that type of thing, it becomes a little bit more challenging. So that's kind of why we were thinking parking garage, because nobody wants that space except us. So we'll see. We're kind of waiting right now for the chancellor's office to approve it. And then I'm hopeful that the parking and transportation services folks will work with us to make it possible. The other thing that we were thinking about doing in that space, just to be kind of even more safe, is to have a couple of light sort of athletic fans set up in a certain way so that we're ensuring that the airflow is moving in a certain direction. Unfortunately, the airflow is going to be moving at me probably. So I'll probably have to be in like a biohazard suit of some type or something, but we'll see. So it's developing. It's developing.
Thanks for sharing that. One of our rough draft plans for our rehearsal hall, our choral rehearsal room, there's an entire back panel that can open out into the outdoors. But like you said, Scott, even if we're kind of spaced out, everything is kind of going towards the conductor. So one of the solutions was to kind of put a shower curtain PVC little cubicle in front of the conductor stand. And, you know, it's an idea. So we'll see what the next iteration is going to look like. Dr. Khaefi, I understand that you've been really involved with kind of creating a point of advocacy, or just really proactive with your planning with the administration at SDSU. Can you walk us through that process and what things are looking like right now?
So in my, when we closed down in March, my colleagues and I kind of got to work pretty quickly, and we came up with a number of different contingency plans and advocacy plans for various learning modalities. And one of those was face-to-face instruction. And we used the NASM documents, we used the NAFME document, and the National Standards 2014 document to justify why various aspects of choral music making were a necessity to uh, graduating a student and preparing them for the field and for the job market that they were going to be entering into, particularly here in Southern California, as it's a large industry sector down here. And so we crafted our language to really reflect the needs of students who would be leaving university and who would have to be prepared with these skills one way or another.
Thank you for that. Dr. Earnhart, did you find yourself having to kind of step into a similar space as a DCA at Fresno State?
No, we actually have had, a great amount of support for trying to keep all of our ensembles going, not just one particular area. I do want to add to what I was talking, my previous statement about some of our plans. One of the things that we're actually looking into are the plexiglass partitions for indoor singing. And that would help for the wind players as well. So that is something that we're looking into to see if we can potentially put that into use. And I should also note that our band hall has doors that open to the outside world. So that would also help with our ventilation. So
that's great. Have you folks talked or worked through any ingress or egress protocols at all? No. Okay, and I suppose that'll probably come from the administration, or that'll kind of link itself to CDC. So let's kind of go right into the hot button discussion, or the hot button point, which is kind of around how can we develop either curriculum, or how can we develop a rehearsal, either virtual, either hybrid, or a face-to-face rehearsal during these into this semester of the unknown, in ways that kind of ensure instruction for our singers and our learners that may not have access to technology, or have very limited access to technology. I know I've been struggling with this a lot, and to kind of contextualize where I'm coming from, when we pivoted at UH from face-to-face instruction to virtual instruction, I lost around 25% of my membership, not because they didn't want to be in rehearsal, but because they didn't have the resources to join. UH is a campus, predominantly a commuter campus, in which so many of our students are living with their parents, are living with siblings, are living with multiple people within the house. So many of my students have to share technology with other people in the house, and that's kind of resulted in a nightmare with how we provided access of instruction to all of our students. I'm still trying to articulate solutions, and I'm wondering, Dr. Bumbach, where your head is at with all of this.
Well, I've been approaching it first, of course, my students' needs. And I know that my university has a one-to-one laptop program. So every single one of my students has a laptop. But one of the equity issues that we've run into is my students don't necessarily have space to sing in their in their homes. My students in the dorms have roommates, and they have very close quarters. I'm not sure what returning to dorms is going to look like in the fall. They haven't really told us about that. And students that are off campus are quite often in an apartment within walls, or some living at home. So even though we do have access to that technology, we don't necessarily have the space. So some of the challenges that I'm trying to overcome right now are, how do we make singing happen when there's not necessarily a safe place to do it? Outdoors is out of the question for us most of the year, because we just, we have sub-zero temperatures quite a bit. So I'm wrestling with that at the moment. However, when it comes to the actual technology piece, my approach is, I have to find out what my student that has the least technological access has, and everything has to be designed on that. I can't base it on the medium, because it simply is not equitable. So because I know that all of my students have PC laptops with touch screens, because it's provided by the university. I base everything on that as kind of my lowest common denominator right there. I can't necessarily expect my students to have high quality USB microphones, so high quality recording is out of the question. I can't necessarily expect them to have even headphones is kind of not necessarily available to everybody for use. So I have to take away really focused high quality listening because they're not going to have access to great sound quality in a lot of situations. So all of my plans are kind of based on what we do have. So while I'm approaching that, I'm really being aware of the limits of their technology.
Thanks, Dr. Bumbach. I think you kind of made some really important points, especially with shifting aesthetics, because we are not necessarily going to have all of these technologies available to us. Dr. Earnhart, how are things? Where are you with this this conundrum?
You know, we were really fortunate here at Fresno State that we were able to provide students that needed it Wi-Fi hotspots to take home for the semester, as well as devices, which made what we did do this last semester possible as far as meeting and any sort of listening and discussions and things like that we did, you know, in this way. So we're very fortunate in that regard. And, you know, to my knowledge, they're just working that much harder to try to, you know, get a hold of that many more devices and hotspots for the upcoming semester. So, is on how different technologies work, at least are being introduced to it, which I am also grateful for that. We did run similar problems for space at home. You know, mom and dad are working at home, little brother, little sister working at home on computer. But I had students that, you know, I had students at back porch on their front porch, students that use their garage, just really trying with having space so that they could focus and engage in, you know, what we were, and in the recordings that we were trying to, you know, do as individuals and submit. So that's kind of where we are with that. I like what you said about, you know, we do have to remember that we have to focus on the student that has the least amount of access. And I think that's something that's really easy for all of us to forget. So thank you for that reminder. I know that our department is also looking at software, you know, site licenses we will take care of so our students don't have that financial burden. And we're looking at, you know, a couple of different programs that we would try to use across the department so that students aren't having to learn multiple technologies, different classes within just our department. So
that was brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Glisten, how are things going? Where's your head on this?
So I'll echo the things that have been said. We're, you know, Cal Poly is a little different in a lot of ways in that very, very few of our students are from the area that we're in. Most all of our students are not from within 30 minutes driving distance of our campus. So the hotspots thing is a little bit more difficult. What we've been focused on is, because our campus also provides those resources when students reach out, they can be provided with the tools that they need for online learning. My concern has been more identifying those students and making sure that those students are comfortable, not just simply giving up and dropping out of school or choir because they may not feel comfortable coming forward, expressing their needs and concerns. So we've been trying to kind of focus on, we've started some mentoring programs, especially for incoming freshmen. We're having some Zoom kind of hangouts for incoming students that are interested in choir, and those are things that will be discussed in that time, that you'll have a mentor of somebody that's already in choir. So I'm hoping that if some of those needs are out there, that they may feel, if they don't feel comfortable coming to me, They may feel comfortable discussing it with one of their peers or something like that, just so we can kind of try to identify those kids and make sure that they just don't fall by the wayside during all of this time. One more thing that I wanted to add, if it's okay, my focus has also been, and this is somewhat related to equity, but it's kind of dealing with the stigma that I can sort of project, and sort of I'm sensitive to the idea of the students that are on campus versus the idea of the students that are not on campus. And this is a big deal for us because, as I said, most of our students don't live nearby. So because of that, I'm really trying to be intentional, or we are really trying to be intentional, that when we do auditions, we're not asking students if they're coming to campus or not. My student population of all of my choirs, I would say maybe a composite of 30% are music majors. So it's predominantly non-music majors. So, you know, we're not going to ask them if they're coming to campus. I'm going to do all my auditions on Zoom. That way I can feel comfortable placing them into the ensembles that I feel like they deserve to be in, without it being a consideration whether or not they are on campus. Now, I'm not saying that works for everybody, because there's absolutely reason to, you know, to maybe just do an ensemble with those that are here. I understand that. But a couple of you have thrown out about hybrid models. We're looking at hybrid models so that in every choir I have, there will be some opportunity for people that are face-to-face. There will be also an opportunity that everybody will meet via Zoom. So whether you're on campus or not, you're still part of the group. And so there's just going to be a variety of things, and then a bunch of rehearsing for later in the year when we hope to actually be able to come into.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Khaefi.
Yeah, I'm to dovetail from what Scott was saying. I'm very much in the same place. We're able to get the tech that they needed in March to go their way and still be able to participate in the choral program in some way. My concern going forward is when we have to begin addressing SLOs for students who are participating on campus and for students who are participating off campus. How do we create an equitable experience for students who can't come to a rehearsal? I've gotten emails from students who have said that only 2 of their courses have been approved to meet face-to-face, and that they don't know if they should risk coming to campus for 2 courses, or they can't come to campus for 2 courses because they live 100 miles away. And so these kinds of issues are at the forefront of my mind as I'm thinking of how to construct this curriculum. And to go off of what Matthew was saying, I think one of the one viable solution to this is to be able to provide the very basest level of tech possible, meaning some, you know, very basic microphone, some very basic means of sending that to us, and then basically determining the entire curriculum on that. Because if I can start with an equitable platform, then I can at least ensure that everyone is on the same playing field when it comes to constructing a curriculum. Now, how the graduate students fit into that, and how the other ensembles fit into that, and then how assessment fits into that, that's also part of my thinking. I think I'm going to be tossing quality, maybe the way that we think of quality, out the window, and really kind of focusing on community building and communal experiences, shared experiences, because we can't. There's no way of trying to replicate what we had in any kind of equitable way when we're dealing with so many people in so many disparate places.
I mean, I think you bring out such a good point that I kind of want to circle back on, as well as Scott, your point about how do we pivot in equitable ways from a face-to-face to a hybrid model to a model that is entirely distant or virtual. And I think maybe let's ask this question out to the collective first: is what does low tech or no tech assessment look like in this type of capacity. So we are either because of the need to pivot or because the university makes the call that we need to be distant, or we need to kind of plan our curricula around virtual learning. What does low to no tech assessment look like?
I have a few thoughts on that. First of all, one of the principles that I'm kind of approaching this strange time with is that performance is not the goal throughout this. So I don't want to ever think of the term of abandoning excellence, but it's really redefining that excellence. So for me, because all of my students are engineers and scientists, I'm focusing on creativity. I'm focusing on the scientific aspect of things. So it's a lot easier for me to create things that are going to put them along the path to developing creativity that's going to serve them in their profession. When I kind of think about a lot of the issues that I've felt really deeply about our profession in the last decade, I think about what a wonderful opportunity this is for music education majors that are going to take the best practices that we're kind of scrambling to come up with and develop something new and innovative. So I think that the assessment has to really shift its focus. And I really don't have an answer for how we approach this, the learning objectives and those outcomes that we already have written and are kind of adhering to. But in those opportunities that we have to redefine them, I think this is an opportunity for us to really get to the philosophy of what we're doing, why we're doing, and what we want our students to walk away from at the end of a college degree. So I don't know if that answers anything of your question there, Jace, other than calling more questions.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify, because I think Arian kind of tried to kind of circle in on basically what flavor of assessment am I kind of discussing. And basically to where I'm coming from with this is, I think a point of advocacy that I had to make, especially as someone in the ensemble area, is our cumulative or summative experience for what we do is based on performance, right? And our virtual, we did the virtual choir thing, and I'm still wrestling with that idea because for so many and we've discussed this in some capacities, but for so many of our learners, I mean, it was a lot for them to kind of sing out into the void by themselves, and that was difficult. It's a difficult task, and it doesn't necessarily speak to my teaching philosophy because you rid the experience of process, because what they see then is just this amalgamation of squares, and I'm not adding a value judgment to it, and they see this product in which they weren't in which the process was necessarily communal. And I know my responsibility in a NASM curriculum is through the perspective of synthesis, right? We take what's happening in musicology, we take what's happening in the studio, we take what's happening in theory, and we actualize them in experiential ways. So essentially what I'm asking is, what does that summative or cumulative element look like in ways that are still kind of what you were talking about, Arian, are still deemed as rigorous at an administrative standpoint, but provides access to everyone? And I know that's a big gargantuan question, but does anyone want to either connect to it, or Scott, I see you just unmuted. Why don't you take it from here?
Uh-oh. You know what? I think this is really hard, right? I think one of the things that maybe I have kind of discovered through trial and error and lots of fault this quarter, is that, the cumulative experience, it may be, we did like Jeffrey, did at San Jose State, we did a full sort of hour-long video concert presentation, which included some virtual choirs, but it also included a lot of other things. It included, so that's kind of my point. The chamber, I have a chamber choir, for example, and they were working on Bach. And so for the most of their quarter, we actually did a study of the Bach motets where we listened together on Zoom and we talked about them, and I gave them a little bit of information, but we listened to all 6. That's what they liked. That's what they wanted to do because they're really kind of brainiac kids and that's what they're excited about. Now, we weren't, there's no way we were going to do a Bach motet virtual choir. It would have been a disaster, right? In terms of, polyphony and just craziness. So for them, their contribution to the concert was they took an old recording of themselves singing Bach B minor, and they had a funny video that they made it out of it. They videoed themselves doing really sad things in quarantine and then really happy things when that Resurrexy portion came on. It was very funny. So we incorporated that into the video, and that was their contribution. Now, I mean, I think if an administrator saw that, they would not necessarily think that that was, high academic rigor. But then there's the other part of it that we did in terms. So I'm not, I wasn't necessarily, they're not necessarily related directly is what I'm saying. So, in this weird time that we have, I think we may have to start thinking about our end product, so to say, our final concert. If we do one, it may not be directly correlated with all of the learning and all of the objectives that are happening. It might be okay for us to talk about a subject together. My women's chorus is discussing possibly once a week getting together in a small groups will share about a female composer that maybe not everybody knows about. So they're learning about their repertoire, they're listening to it. Am I going to assess that? Well, I mean, I'll be assessing it based upon their presentation, but that may not find itself directly into the final product. It may, but if it doesn't, maybe that's okay in this time.
Yeah, awesome. Go ahead, Arian.
I completely agree, Scott and Matthew. The more I think about how we're going to approach our profession, and the more I think about how we're going to do that equitably and how we're going to do that across the profession, because yes, some organizations really have the constituency and the technological capability to really pull off anything, and to pull off anything in a really spectacular way. And that's not the case with a lot of institutions and organizations. And so my mind keeps going back to those choral rehearsals that I'm sure we've all had, where we spent 30, 45 minutes rehearsing a unison line. And the object was simplicity. And I think that that's going to take a really central role going forward in trying to craft curriculum, is how do we reapproach simplicity, and how do we sort of get away from this narrative of excellence and achieving excellence and complexity, and how can we boil down our curriculums to really focus on what is achievable and what is simply achievable, and then take that and break that up into its constituent parts. How do we take that and stratify it so that we can have excellence, but in something very simple? And so that's how I've been thinking about approaching my curriculum for next year. Something, I mean, to just spitball here, I mean, something as simple as, how do you really effectively use your phone to record? Or how do you, what goes into really crafting a consonant? Or what, just these very small tidbits that can become very large and that we can focus on.
I love that idea. That's beautiful. And a thought or something that we're planning for that is low tech for our choral program is we know that we can secure funding for recorded devices. We know that much is true. And an idea that we had was, whether it be hybrid, whether it be face-to-face or whether it is entirely distant. Because I think one of the biggest issues that we have, that I think Scott kind of was circling in on, is how to pivot between those three components and those three realities, and how to articulate that in our syllabi, so that it's still, even if we pivot, it still looks like, or an attempt to, it still looks very streamlined in terms of our instructional or curricular offering, right? So we're planning to kind of focus in on the component of decolonized practice through oral transmission or song transmission. So something that we're trying or planning to do is at the very beginning, either through video or through face-to-face, knowing that a lot of our students identify as Native Hawaiian or Asian American or Hapa, a combination of those two, is to start off the rehearsal with a name chant and to kind of walk them through the structure of a name chant and what that sounds like and how you give them free range to compose that name chant, and for them to kind of create that name chant and to go backwards and to interview and work with their parents or their guardians or generations before as far back as they can, either through discussion. And then that summative or that cumulative assessment is then teaching or working with people either in their household or anybody that they can work with within their core and team to teach that name chant and then to pass that idea forward. I mean, is it something that we can necessarily grade? I mean, that is up for discussion, but I think what I love about what you folks are articulating is the fact that, you know, we have to kind of forego and maybe press pause on these high nuanced aesthetics of choral music making and really ask ourselves, where does this idea come from? Where does this lens come from? And if it's already within a traumatic event like this, especially for my learners of color or marginalized identities within my ensemble, maybe it's an opportunity for them to kind of find themselves or find different entry points within the choral practice. So that's an idea that I had. Cari, where's your brain at?
I'm just taking it all in. I had a conversation after a recent webinar that was broadcast around the world. When I taught overseas, there was a moment in time with the ensemble there that I had to get my students to stop focusing on how they were different and start focusing on how they were alike. And after listening and observing and hearing colleagues' feedback from what we were hearing, I said, you know, we have to start focusing on what we can do, not what we can't do. And I think, you know, we've spent a lot of time in the last few months focusing on what we can't do. And kind of came to where Arian was talking about, you've all touched on it a little bit, coming back to the basic elements of what we do. And then how can we get creative teaching those basic elements and engaging our students in those elements so that they can become better teachers, they can become better singers, they just become better human beings. I've spent this week working with a top-notch team of colleagues at this arts institute, and you know, we've had the students, you know, they plan to be a 60-voice choir. Well, we're a 60-voice choir, but we're online, and we've come up with different things about building community and how to listen and how to be an observer and what does it mean to bring your own person into an ensemble? What is an independent learner? And things like that. And we've done a ton of creative artistic responses to texts and music that we've listened to and different things that we have discovered together this week. And it's been a beautiful experience. And by walking through that with my colleagues and these students this week, it just, I think, opens up the realm of possibility for what we really can do with our students, whether it's hybrid or existing on the virtual plane completely. So, you know, I think we have to kind of strip things down to what are the basic concepts we want our students to walk, how can we map in a creative online format so that they, you know, explode that out into the world. I think, you know, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. So.
Can I jump in for a second? I have been wrestling with this thought about how a lot of educators that I'm talking with and that I'm visiting with online are still kind of in the lamenting stage that they're trying so desperately to cling to the profession as they have defined it in their head. And I'm really starting to shift in the direction of allowing us to strip it down to those simple parts, as everyone has mentioned. And then once we've done that, taking this opportunity to rebuild it into a profession that's more equitable, that's more just, the idea of one of the classes that I'm moving to online is that I'm going to shift away the oppressive system of grading and replace it with mastery. Because it is a more equitable system, and it gives opportunity for students who are approaching things from a different existence of have versus have nots to master skills on their own time frame, to do things as they're ready to move into the next level. That's kind of the benefits of the online system for some of these non-ensemble music making opportunities that we have. So, I'm really looking forward to an opportunity to completely rebuild my situation to look like I've always dreamed that it could be.
Fabulous. I love that. Go ahead, Arian.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond, or rather just echo, Jace, what you said a moment ago about taking your students' individual choral experiences and actually empowering your students as individual vectors for choral music making in their own homes. I think that's really fabulous, and I'm looking forward to kind of exploring that idea. That really hadn't occurred to me in the way that you had said that. And Matthew, I'm really curious about how you are planning on achieving that, and whether or not your administrative is supportive, because that's been a notion that I've had for a long time, and I know there's a lot of support around the country and a lot of supportive colleagues. But how have you sort of had those conversations with your admin?
Well, I'm kind of taking advantage of the fact that my admins have absolutely no idea what I do. I'm in a situation where I'm in a social sciences and humanities department that I have one full-time music colleague. So we have the luxury of telling them, this is our plan, this is our thought. We get to justify it. So we don't have any NASM accreditation that we have to tear down. We don't have any of those inherent things that we have to tear down already. They were just never there for us. So as I'm building these, I'm starting to, like the merit system, the mastery system, I'm doing a badge system with a music fundamentals course that I'm going to be teaching, putting everything online. It's going to, I'm hoping, spawn ideas for how I can do that with the vocal tech courses that I'm kind of converting my treble and tenor bass choirs into. So I would love to answer that question maybe in January, when I've thought my way through it.
And I think that's a great place to be. What I'm really inspired from in this conversation is that we seem to be welcoming in kind of thinking through and grappling with these questions that are rooted in equity. And I think as we go forward, like my hope is that we continue to ask these questions, not because of the circumstances of the pandemic, but based on the needs of our students. And I know that I am hoping that I can take this lens that I have with me throughout the rest of my career. I'm looking at our time, and we're nearing the end of the hour, and I just wanted to offer you a leil mahalo, a voice of gratitude to all of you, Dr. Earnhart, Dr. Glisten, Dr. Khaefi, and Dr. Bumbach. Thank you for your thoughts, and thank you for just sharing in such a vulnerable way. Mahalo, and thank you, everyone.